skipping ahead a little bit, did you and the deputy have a conversation in the front yard? What, if anything, did you express to him at that time that concerned you?
So today from Judge Simpson, I have for you a preliminary examination for a murder case. This started off as a welfare check for a 70-some-year-old woman, and it ended up a murder case because a detective followed a hunch. Now the question is, was there a Fourth Amendment violation there? So that's one of the things that's going to be sorted in this examination. Take a look at it. Let me know your thoughts on the judge's ruling at the end. My name is Dan. This is the Courtroom Files.
Need to quit messing with me. Court does call the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Ronald Seavoy Fleming.
Morning, Your Honor. Ashley Lonnie Feltus for the people.
Good morning, ma'am. Please start before Rick Johnson on behalf of Mr. Fleming. Approach the seat to my right.
In your name, sir? Thank you.
Your Honor, we are set this morning for a preliminary examination. It is my understanding after talking with Mr. Johnson that we are proceeding to a preliminary examination. People anticipate calling 4 witnesses, and I have a copy of the revised post-mortem examination report that I am admitting pursuant to statute with no objection from defense counsel, if I may approach with Exhibit 1.
Yes. Is that all correct, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
And Your Honor, I have 4 witnesses: Ronald Fleming, who is not the defendant, born a different year; Detective Thomas Robb, Detective Aaron Soyring, and Detective Heather Morrison. Detective Morrison is remaining with me as my officer in charge.
That's fine. All right. You may call your first witness.
Did the court admit Exhibit 1? I apologize.
I did.
Thank you very much.
Hours ago.
I guess people would call Ronald Fleming for 1971.
Sir, please come forward to be sworn.
Steve, right hand. You solemnly swear to affirm the testimony about the give the truth, all truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. What I'm seeing. Stage for your person has an
WMING. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. How do you know Ronald Seavoy Fleming? He's your son. Do you see the person you know to be Ronald Seavoy Fleming in the courtroom today? Could you tell me where he's sitting and what he's wearing, please?
Next to this person right here, he's looking at the top of the white underneath shirt.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant?
Without objection, record shows so.
Did you know a person named Theodora Fleming? Who was that? Your mother was Theodora Fleming? Do you know what township your mother lived in 2024? Did you have occasion to go to her house on May 17th, 2024? Why did you go to her house on that date?
Phone call from my house. Notifying mother. You failed to check in, mother, sisters, they would text each other every morning, group of life to see if they're still around.
Well, how old was your mother at that point in 2024?
73.
73.
Just turns.
And after you had heard from your aunts that they hadn't heard from your mother, what did you decide to do?
Initially, I was going to go out, come out, they my aunt informed me that my son was kind of unaware. I changed movie, come in the morning, calling.
And where do you live at? What city? And where is that?
My house, north of see if I can.
So a little bit of a drive to come up to Ypsilanti Township. Did you arrive at the house on May the 17th, 2024? How'd you get there? Where did you park when you got there?
That's the point.
What did you notice about the house when you drove up to it?
Put my one house, it pumped out all the windows. The sheets on the windows were shattered.
Why did that pop out to you?
I have to say last, I've never seen fully cut all the sheets. Never seen.
Was that something your mother would routinely do?
I never seen it. Oh,
Would always have them open? Did you notice anything else about the house?
actually, no. When I got out, knock on the doors, I noticed that both screen doors were locked from the inside, which is normal. But with the shades closed and then it's something it's just way out of the board.
Did you notice any sounds coming from the house? Did you go up to the doors or windows and try to knock on them or see what was going on?
Front door, that's one which I found out the screen was locked up. Went to the side door, realized the door, the screen door was locked, so there's no access to the door. So I went back to the front of the house, just have those up the just to see if I could get a response from the dog.
What kind of dog was it? Bull Mastiff. Was it a big dog? Did you hear any response from the dog?
Once I tapped on the window, the dog would jump up and brushed it against the long vertical line. So I just kept tapping on the window just to see what was what was going on. What could I see? Fiction. And the first thing I noticed was involving the dog, water bucket was full. That just told me someone was in the house without answering the door.
Judge speculation. Sustained.
When you saw that when you heard the dog, you said you noticed the water bucket was full. Did you contact the police?
First I called the police. Before I called, I just walk around. And follow me. If I was just really checking. But with the dog. As soon as I saw that, I stepped off the porch. A little bit into the yard. Please. Have to call my
What was your aunt's name?
hurry.
Did she have a key to your mother's home? Did she give that to the police officers? Do you remember the address where your mother lived?
15 water.
That's in Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County. Now, eventually the police came to the home, right? Did your son ever exit that home? Did he exit the home after the police got there? When did he come out of the home?
First thing, police officer showed he saw the dog, so he called the Washington County. He makes his hey, I can't show and the dog enter. They proceeded to enter the house, breaking kind of said sealed, breaking the locks of the screen door. Used the key to open up the door just initially. Dog catcher secured the dog. Police officer.
And you had asked the police officer who came to help you with finding your mom, right? You had asked that deputy that came to the house to help you? You were worried about your mother? After the dog was secured, did that deputy go inside the home? At some point after he went in the home, did the deputy and your son come outside?
Once the deputy went in, seconds later, I think that mom, they could to assist from the house.
Did he ask you to step outside? At some point, did you see your son? Was there anything about his behavior that concerned you?
Not until we walked out the house, that's when I really started paying close.
What did you notice?
Shocked that I was there. Reactions and utter shock. Objection, foundation, speculation.
If you want to ask questions, I wouldn't allow the answer, but
Thank you. You've known your son his whole life, correct, sir? You're familiar with him? You're familiar with how he portrays his emotions on his face? And in this situation, had you seen emotions like shock before on his face?
It's more so surprised that someone. Good way to say it. I don't think he anticipated.
Now,
so that the record's clear, I'm going to overrule the objection with that foundation. I'm going to allow the answer. Go.
thank you very much, Your Honor. At some point, while you, your Aunt Tony, the defendant, and the deputy were outside discussing where your mother might be, did you speak to the deputy by yourself?
Not initially, no, initially, no, we were all sitting and just talking, police officer was asking Ronald questions. Where could she possibly be? What was her phone? And we all reaching out, looking for her at the Coney Island restaurant. She goes to every so often. Initially, we thought we were at the County Rec Center because she's also a swimmer. Police officer, he lied. Whatever told us to check and see if there's any ambulance reporting, so that she would pick up an ambulance or in the hospital. Check to see if she's in the hospital. And the officer started asking, has she ever walked off?
This one of the hearsay is what the officer asked.
Well,
I'm not offering it for the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor. I'm offering it to guide the next steps in what this witness did.
I'll overrule the objection. Take it for that purpose.
Thank you, Your Honor. At some point, did the deputy go to his car that was parked out front?
He did, but in fact,
Sure. Skipping ahead a little bit, did you and the deputy have a conversation in the front yard? What, if anything, did you express to him at that time that concerned you?
when we got, let's replay, I don't know. Dang. We got, initially we were asked questions, the police officer asked questions. Ronald made a statement. As long as I heard it, I knew that was a lie. I knew there was something false information, and that's when we went back into the house to gather information, evidence, whatnot, with timeline. Then the police officer noticed, looked at Ronald, saw his shoes, saw his legs, whatnot, put him in custody, put him in custody. And while we were out in front of him, Yes, we did talk. Ask, if I saw it, because I asked the officer, how did you look at this? That's just one thing.
So before your son was arrested, did you and the deputy have a conversation in the front yard? Do you recall talking to him at all and expressing your concerns? What were you concerned might have happened?
Initially, initially we loved me fast, very, got it. Man, like, they she got the bail. That was her. From what? Where is she?
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Sir, the truth, when you spoke to the police, you described your relationship with your son as estranged. Sir, I don't answer questions, I ask.
Oh, no, because
Did you understand my question, sir? Okay, now, isn't it true that prior to that day, you hadn't spoken or seen your son in over a year? No further question.
All right, thank you. Any redirect?
I have no redirect, Your Honor. May this witness be excused so he can witness the rest of the proceedings pursuant to the Victims' Rights Act?
Any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down, sir, and you may remain in the courtroom. Court recalls the case of the People versus Ronald.
Ashley Phelps for the people.
Good morning, man. Please, court, Kareem Johnson, on behalf.
Right.
On
Thank you. Ready to proceed.
Thank you. We had called Thomas Robb, I believe, Your Honor.
Sir, please come forward to be sworn.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to affirm the testimony about to give the truth, all nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
State, spell your first and last name for the record, please.
Heritage Thomas Robb, THOMAS. Robb is RAAB.
Okay, you may inquire.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. How are you employed?
The detective with Washington County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been a detective with the Washington County Sheriff's Office?
I
Were you employed before that with the Sheriff's Department?
was
In what capacity?
deputy for about 4 years.
Do you have prior law enforcement experience before you came to work for the Washington County Sheriff's Office?
I do. Police officer in the town of Jackson.
Were you working for the Washington County Sheriff's Office on May 17th, 2024? Do you recall what day of the week that was? Were you dispatched to 1315 South Warner in Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County? And why were you sent to that address?
I've been dispatched there for a welfare check, for some family members had called in, stating they requested some assistance checking on a relative.
Had you done a welfare check for an elderly person before? When you arrived at the home, were there any people outside?
Yes, there's
Did you speak with them? Who did you identify them to be?
the male identified as Ronald Fleming. I think he is the son of the elderly woman subject of check, welfare check. The female was a Tony Curry. She was the subject's sister.
Did either of them give you a key to go inside the house?
Did.
Who were you looking for?
Theodore Fleming.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions to describe the layout of this house. How many doors are there to this home?
On the exterior.
Yes, how many exterior doors?
There's a front door, which is on the front of the house, street side. And then there's a side door, which if you're facing the house would be to the left, which is the east.
Is that adjacent to a driveway? Are there any other buildings on this property besides the home?
Attached garage and the independent driveway on the east side of the house.
Is that in front of the home or behind where the home is located? Did you check these doors? Did you check the screen doors? What did you find about the screen doors and the regular doors?
The street doors and the actual physical door, they're both locked.
Did you open the screen doors with something?
Yeah, I asked, both, Mr. Fleming and Ms. Curry. When informed them the screen doors were locked, and I asked them if they were fine if I popped the doors with a small. Trying not to cause any damage, just so we could access the interior door to see if the kids would open it. Which I did.
Did you check any of the windows? What did you notice about the windows?
I remember checking the windows on either side of the front door, as you're facing the front door, the window to the left. Was unlocked. I was able to slide it open with my hand.
Was it closed at the time that you contacted us? And when you opened the window, did you hear anything?
Yes. On the parking side.
What did you do next?
I announced myself, I called out the sheriff's office. The dog was barking and the dog ran up to the windowsill and jumped in. He was trying to bite me, so I closed the window.
Were there any cars in the driveway?
Yes.
Were you able to identify whose cars they were at any point?
Red Jeep, SUV that was backed in towards the back of the driveway, which I identified as Theodore Fleming's car. And then there was a black sedan nosed in on the street and way. And Ronald Fleming said that was his car.
Did you call for any help with the dog?
Yes, I asked for dispatch to send our animal control officer over to help get the dog contained.
Did you use the key to make entry into the home?
Yes, the key that is pretty.
Which door did you go in? At this time, was the animal control officer present? After the dog was taken under control, did you actually go inside the home? Can you describe the layout of this home for the court, please?
Sure, it's a single story, ground level home. It has a basement. At the front of the home, there's a living room and a kitchen. On the first floor, and then just towards the back, there's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Bedroom on the, I'll get myself confused with directions, but if you're walking through the front door in the back right is a bedroom with a bed, and towards the back left is another bedroom that was arranged as an office, kind of office.
You mentioned there was a basement. Did you go in the basement as well? Where did you start going through the home when you first made entry?
I started at the side door off the driveway. I walked in and announced myself. I was at the sheriff's office. I received a response. Walked through the first floor. I made my way towards the back bedroom. Looking for Theodora. Checked that bedroom. I didn't find anything there. The bed and some, pieces of furniture. The walls. And then kind of went around almost like in a circle, checking the bathroom, the office. And
did you find any people on the first floor? Did you go to the basement? What happened when you went to the basement?
Checked basement. Mr. Ronald Fleming entered the house with me and said that when I went downstairs, there would be a door to the right with a closed door that was set up as a bedroom. So I checked the rest of the basement. I announced myself against the sheriff's office. I knocked on the door, didn't receive an answer, so I went to the door.
You made a reference to Mr. Ronald Fleming. Was that the defendant you were speaking with, or was that somebody else?
Danny sitting in the back of the courtroom made the 911 call for assisting the son of.
Once you were in the basement, did you find anybody?
Yes.
Who did you find in the basement? Do you see that person in the courtroom today? Can you please tell me where he's sitting in an article of clothing that he's wearing?
My left jumpsuit, white sleeves.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness identified this defendant.
That objection record shows so reflect.
Did you speak with the defendant? What did you say to him?
I asked him if he looked here. He said he did. I asked him if he had looked here with Theodore. He said he did. I asked him if he'd seen Theodore, where she was. He said he did. So I told him that some family members had called, or they were all trying to figure out where she was, and I asked him to come upstairs and step outside with me so we could try to figure out where Theodore was.
Where did he go when you asked him to step outside?
Up the basement stairs to the first floor, and then on the side over to the driveway. Mr. Fleming senior firm.
Did you go back outside as well? Did you check any other areas of the property after you went back outside?
Mr. Fleming senior had one. The yard. The inside behind the garage. And behind the house, there's a small lawn, and there's a tree with a little garden around it. Side area behind the attached garage, water.
Did you notice anything about the yard?
Directly behind the house is kind of a small patio. Land kind of break off, and then there's a garden, shrubs in it. There's a tree in the middle. I noticed there's a wheelbarrow and a shovel sticking out of the ground next to one corner of the garden. In that particular corner of the garden, had a large patch of bare dirt.
Were you able?
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
I just said that there's nothing growing there.
At this point, had you found Theodore anywhere in the house, in the garage, or any immediately visible area of the front or backyard? After the defendant went outside, did you speak with him as well as Miss Tony Curry and the defendant's father? And who did you understand that the defendant was to Theodora? How were they related? What did he say the last time he saw her was?
He's Mr. Fleming, I'll say Mr. Fleming Jr. If that's okay, just for junior and senior.
That's fine, or the defendant, whatever please you.
Well, I spoke with the defendant, and I asked him the last time he saw Theodore was. At first he said, a few days ago, I asked him to try to narrow that down. Told me that gone with Theodore to a vet appointment on Monday. But he last seen her maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. But trying to narrow it down a little bit further, I asked him what time of day he might have seen her last. He said he believed it was in the evening. I think we kind of settled on Tuesday. I think it was the last night.
Did he say if anyone else had been in the house?
Yes, he said nobody other than Theodore had seen it.
Did you ask him about Theodore maybe going for a walk? And what did he say about that?
Said that Theodore was kind of stooped over or a little hunchbacked, and she was elderly, and she probably couldn't have fit into the driveway. She tried to walk.
After you spoke with all of these people, did you do any checks to see if Theodore had been transported to a hospital by ambulance?
Yes, I contacted dispatch and asked them to call the local hospitals, Trinity Health, or also St. Joe's, and the University Mission Hospital. I also asked our dispatch to check the ambulance service. And I also went and personally checked on my in-car computer for any calls that we might have had something at the end.
Any positive results?
Dispatch informed me that Theodore had not been checked into any of the hospitals. HV had not been at the address or transported. We hadn't had any calls at that address.
When you say a very long time, what time frame are you talking about?
I want to say over a year, but I'm not 100% sure on how long that is, but more than a full month.
When you determined that she had not been transported to the hospital and was not at the hospital, did you do any other investigation?
Yep, I asked, we've asked Ms. Curry to call Theodore's cell phone. Ms. Curry previously told me she tried calling her and texting her and had received an answer. So I asked her to call again while we were all there, just to see if we could find the phone maybe.
What happened when you asked her to call the phone?
She called it, we heard it right inside, the defendant went and retrieved calling again.
Did you look at the phone? What did you notice about the status of the messages and calls on the phone?
I
went through emails, phone calls, text messages. And it seemed like, all the phone calls and text messages stopped being answered or opened, read, or replied to as of, it was Tuesday.
Where did you put that phone?
Placed in my patrol car.
After putting the phone in your patrol car, did you speak with Ronald Fleming Sr.? Without telling me what he said, did you go back to the house again? And what were you doing when you went back to the house for that second time?
I asked the family there to get a look around again, just to try to see if I missed anything, if there was any clues we could find that might tell us where Theodore was.
Did you ask the defendant to handle the dog at that time?
Dog was the most aggressive dog. The dog was the most friendly towards the defendant, so I asked him to secure the dog. The dog was inside of the house.
Had the animal control officer left at this point? So you asked the defendant if he could secure the dog so you could search again?
Bring the dog outside into on the driveway, there's a dog run, chain link fence. They asked him to secure the dog there so we could look around without being harassed. But
can you describe the fences that existed around the driveway area so the court can have an idea of what this was like?
yes, if you're facing the house, the driveway's on the left. There's about a 6 or 7 foot chain link fence that touches the wall of the house, goes across the driveway, then goes back to where it connects with the detached garage. And the detached garage on the back of it is connected to the property line fence. And then if you're trying to go from the backyard to the driveway, there's about a 4 foot chain link fence that completes the dog right here on the driveway.
And that fence that's between that goes across the driveway before you get to the door, is there like a gate in that fence? There's a gate.
There's also on the other side that goes in the backyard. 4 foot section.
Did the defendant, Ms. Curry and Ronald Sr. all consent to you going back into the home? Did you find anything of significance inside the home when you went back in again?
I don't believe I found anything. I don't recall who exactly it was, but I remember Ms. Curry and Mr. Fleming Sr. coming and saying that they had found her Theodore's house keys and car keys. And then I believe they also brought out, it might have been the defendant that brought out her laptop and iPad.
So at this point, what of Theodore's possessions had you been able to identify as being at or near the home?
Her house keys, her car keys, her phone, I believe her ID and credit cards were in a phone case that had ID cards slots on the back, so those were with the phone. Sorry, car, house keys, phone, ID. Laptop, iPad.
Now, at this point, where was her phone located at this time during your search?
I don't remember where exactly the phone was because only the defendant went inside to retrieve the phone when it was ringing. He brought it out to me so I could see where in the house.
And you had secured it in your patrol car? So at this time, was it still in your patrol car? Did you go to get it? As you walked outside of the home, what, if anything, happened?
I was walking up to my car. I had been kind of pulling my hair out, figured to discover anything that I've been on a lot of welfare checks over an hour. Every welfare check I'd ever been on. I was ready to call it quits. I didn't know where Theodore was. Felt like I checked every box. Everything I discovered that far told me that Theodore must be there at that house, but she wasn't there. I didn't know where she was.
Did you recall anything about your search?
As I was walking out to my patrol car, God spoke to me and told me, "Don't leave. Turn around. She's here." They suddenly had a lot of thoughts, a lot of recollections that came all of a sudden. I remember the garden in the backyard, captured freshly up tractor shovel, out of the ground next to it, the little barrel. I remembered when I was how weird it was that his grandson would be in the house for however many days, 2 or 3 days. Only one there. Nobody else had come to the house. There's no signs of forced entry. You know, Theodore was abducted. The door wasn't kicked in. The doors were all locked inside. Well, her car was there. Her phone was there. Her keys were there. Her friends who didn't live there with her were texting her phone. I saw a message her on her phone. You know, Theodore, are you okay? She wasn't at the hospital. There's everything said if she was anywhere, she was at the house. So I thought, worst case scenario, like, what could be the answer to this? Thinking this in my head. The only person that was there with Theodore was Ronald Fleming. If she's nowhere to be found, the only place that my cop brain goes to is maybe she was killed. And if I killed somebody, where would I hide a body?
You said Ronald Fleming Sr. Did you mean Ronald Fleming Sr. was the only person?
The defendant, sorry. The defendant was the only person that also had a person who was around here. So I asked myself, if I was going to kill somebody and hide a body, where would I put it? I would bury it in the ground. And I remembered the freshly patched up turned dirt in that part. How would I dig a hole? I would use a shovel. There's a shovel sticking out of the dirt. If I'm by myself and I have to move a body, how would I do it? I would use a wheelbarrow that's sitting out next to the patched dirt. So I walked back to the fence on the dog was out, the dog was barking at me. But to the other side, I climbed over the fence, walked into the backyard by the garden, and I saw the patch of freshly upturned dirt was there. Stepped on it with my foot. It was hard tacked around the edges, like the dirt hadn't been disturbed, and in the middle it was soft and slightly sunken in. That section that was soft and slightly sunken in was roughly, 6 feet by 2 feet. It was the size of a body, the size of a grave. So I grabbed the shovel and I started digging. I dug for a little bit. Did something that it wasn't a rock, it wasn't or dirt, it was something softer that the shovel struck. Kind of scraped the dirt with the shovel a little bit. I saw what looked like cloth or a piece of a sheet sticking out of the dirt. So I threw the shovel down. I got down on my hands and knees and I started digging with my hands. I grabbed the sheet and pulled it back, and I reached in with my hand. I grabbed what felt like a human limb, like an arm or a leg.
What did you do after you grabbed what felt to you like a human arm or leg?
I knew in my heart that Theodore had been murdered, and the defendant had buried her in the backyard. I slept on my hands now. I got on the radio. I called for more deputies to come to my location. I went back over the fence, went back to the front of the house, and wasn't really sure the best way how to go about it. They figured out just go talk to the family and pretend like I had found it. Try to buy some time for some more guys to get.
Where did you go in the house when you went back inside? And what area of the home did you end up in to speak with everyone?
Immediately to the left, when you go in through the front door, there's a kitchen, like kitchenette dining.
Like an eat-in kitchen? And who all was in there?
Then Ronald Fleming Sr. and his curry.
As you were standing in there, did you talk with everybody? How long did you speak with them, if you recall?
Maybe 5 minutes.
At some point, did you decide to arrest the defendant? And did you place him in handcuffs? Did you search him and put him in the back of your patrol car? Did you question him at all? Did a sergeant arrive on scene along with many other people? And at that point, did you turn over your investigation to other members of the sheriff's department? May I have one moment, Your Honor?
May. Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Deputy. You go to this location because family called you concerned about the whereabouts of a family member. You get to the location, one of the family members there, Ronald Fleming Sr. Okay. Did you ask Ronald Fleming Sr. if he lived there? Okay. Did you ask Miss Curry if she lived there? Did you ask Mr. Fleming Sr. for identification to check his address? Did you ask Miss Curry for identification to check her address? Miss Curry provided you with the key. Did you ask Miss Curry if she had authority to enter that location?
No.
Did you ask Miss Curry if she had the authority to give you permission to enter that location? You took a screwdriver and you forced entry into one of the screen doors. So you forced entry to access the door that you could use the key. Some point you enter that location. You don't have a search warrant, correct? And you don't have permission from anybody you know to live there to enter that location. The purpose of you entering that location was to check to see on the well-being of Cedra. As a Washington County Sheriff, is there a policy on welfare checks?
Yes.
Or are you familiar with that policy?
Yes, I haven't read it in a while.
Okay.
What we're being into.
The purpose of a welfare check, would you agree with me, is to see one, if the individual is there, and two, if they need medical assistance. You checked the home, Cedra wasn't there. Correct?
Fine.
So therefore, there was nobody to render medical assistance to.
As far as I know at the time.
Okay. And at that point, you did see Mr. Fleming, correct? You asked Mr. Fleming to come outside. That was not an order that Mr. Fleming could resist, correct?
That's the form of the question, Your Honor.
Which one?
The form of the question, I don't. He said it was an ask, but he also said it was an order, so I'm not
Well,
clear on what the
I'm
question.
Overruled on, I think it was clear enough. Go on. You can answer the question.
Oh, well, I asked that, but I don't think I intended it to be, I guess, an order to say.
So it's your testimony if Mr. Fleming Jr., the defendant, would have told you, no, get out of my house, you would have just left?
Well, I think the welfare check would have probably started turning into a investigation.
Well, yeah, I would have. So now you are no longer doing a welfare check, you're now doing a criminal investigation.
Your Honor, he said.
Sustain that.
Thank you.
Okay, what other investigation would have turned into?
Or they find to be, and I believe at the time I'm talking with, there's still a large area of the residents, the property that I haven't looked at yet. Probably would have gone back outside. I mean, this is speculative, telling you what I would have done afterwards. Can you, I guess, ask again what exactly the question?
My question to you was, Ronald Fleming Jr. would have told you, no, I don't want to leave the house, and to get out of my house, would you have left?
It's a speculation at this point.
Sustain.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be speculating on what his behavior would be. I could ask him what he would do under a certain circumstance.
Then I'll check.
Well, he's speculating because the premise of your question didn't happen.
Okay.
So I sustain the.
When you are questioning Mr. Fleming, you have him or you ask him to leave the location, correct?
He just said, why don't you come upstairs so we can talk about how to find the vehicle?
Okay. But you didn't have him just go upstairs, you had him go outside.
Yes, I said upstairs and join this curry.
And by going outside of the location, you had Mr. Fleming Jr. go from a location in which you could not make a warrantless arrest to a location in which you could make a warrantless arrest. Correct?
Objection relevance.
Yeah, and it goes in. It
Go ahead.
goes to Mr. Fleming being in custody and whether or not this officer is acting under the exigent circumstances exception, or if he's doing a criminal investigation inside a home without a warrant.
I don't know that it necessarily goes there all over. I'll allow it. I know that matter much, but go ahead.
So, yes.
By having him leave the inside of the residence, you had Mr. Fleming Jr. go to a location in which you could make a warrantless arrest outside the home.
I'm not aware, I don't know how true that would be, still be on the criminal problem. At the location.
At this point, after speaking to Mr. Fleming, you now realize that Mr. Fleming is the only family member present that actually lives at this location.
I'm sorry. After speaking.
After speaking with Mr. Fleming, you now realize he's the only member of the family present that actually lives at that location.
Just so we can be clear, you're speaking of the defendant.
Defendant Fleming Jr., yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, as far as I knew at that time,
When you began to question Mr. Fleming Jr. outside the residence, was he free to leave?
he wanted to leave at that point in time. Probably could have walked away, although, yeah, other than having at that precise moment in time when he came up from the basement, I was shocked and surprised and had a strange feeling when I got about the whole thing that I found sleeping in the basement, but I would say that I do it at that point, so there we go.
And at this point, you are now suspicious as to the whereabouts of Theodore. You still have not seen or located her at this residence. And you haven't located anybody in the residence that needs medical assistance or emergency aid. You asked the individuals to go back into the home again, correct? How many minutes went by when you asked, by the time you asked to re-enter the home and search?
From the time that the defendant and I walked outside.
Yeah, how many minutes was that?
Not entirely sure.
Did Mr. Fleming Jr. ever give you permission to grab that shovel and dig in that backyard? Did you have a search warrant to grab that shovel and dig in that backyard? No further question.
Any redirect.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Detective. Miss Open.
Aaron Soyring.
All right.
Your Honor, this witness has finished his excuse. Is that correct?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, this witness is excused.
Thank you.
Sir, please come forward and be sworn.
Take a seat, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to affirm the testimony about to give me truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. See, state, spell your first and last name for the record.
Aaron Soyring, AARYSOYRIN.
You may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you employed?
Currently employed Washington County Sheriff's Office as a detective.
How long have you been a detective with the Washington County Sheriff's Office?
About 3 years, 3 months. Prior to that, I was assigned as a road patrol deputy for years.
Do you have any prior law enforcement experience before you were employed with the Sheriff's Office?
Of course, related, but not as an actual certified law enforcement officer.
No. Were you working on May 17th, 2024?
What?
And were you dispatched to 1315 South Warner Road in Ypsilanti Township? For what purpose were you sent to that address?
I've been notified by Captain Hanson that there was a possible homicide. So I was assisting a team of detectives with a search warrant. Specifically, was my task for that residence, the garage and surrounding property.
And was the search warrant obtained for the residence? And when you got there, what was your responsibility?
I kind of assisted Detective Roberts, who was in charge of processing the scene. So I brought the physical copy of the search warrant out there prior to the search taking place. I did have some part to play in the backyard where the scene was ultimately recovered.
What part did you have to play in that?
So we had involved, Detective Morrison had involved the Michigan State Police anthropology team. Hannah Friedlander, she had requested that we verify it was in fact human remains that were present as opposed to an animal. So I unearthed a little bit more of the dirt around what appeared to be a white bag or a white cloth material. And then I used the sterile scalpel with gloved hand, I used the sterile scalpel to create a split into that fabric, and then open that up, peered inside, and I saw an additional layer of fabric, which was a red and yellow quilt-like blanket. And then did the same with this layer of fabric, cut it, and peered inside, and I saw what appeared to be the fair complexion of a deceased subject.
What body part were you looking at?
It appeared to be the lower legs.
After you confirmed that there were human remains in the ground, did you contact any other members of the sheriff's department?
Yes, so I should say I used my right hand to reach in to the fabric and did feel what appeared to be human remains that were cold to touch, and it did feel to be the shin area of the legs. After discovering this, I actually was on the phone with detectives Morrison and Bryden at the time, but I did relay my findings to them as well as contact additional law enforcement at the sheriff's office just to keep them up to speed. They're currently conducting an interview with them.
Did you return any physical evidence or items from that location to the sheriff's department?
I did. I collected a cell phone that was belonged to, I believe it's Deidre Fleming, decedent in this case. This was already collected by Detective Roberts and was in the back of his patrol, or his government issued vehicle, I should say. I also collected a cell phone that was on the steps on the west side of the home. So this was, if you're looking at the house from the street, this would be on the left side of the house. This was believed to be the defendant's phone. Cell phones and other electronic devices were on that search warrant, so I collected that, transported it back to the sheriff's office, and turned it over to our computer forensic detective.
After taking those items to station 1, is that correct? You went to station 1,
That's correct.
which is located in the same building where we're at now? 2201 Hogback. Did you return to that Warner Avenue address? Did you stand by at the scene for some time?
Stood by for several hours. This was during the search by Detective Roberts as well as the Michigan State Police lab personnel that responded. I also was present for the exhumation of the body from the clandestine grave.
Did you eventually attend the autopsy a few days later?
I believe it was May 20th.
Thank you. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Pass witness.
All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, sir. When you went to the location, did you have a search warrant? Oh, when was that search warrant signed?
I don't know the specific time, but signed on May 17th by Judge Simpson. It was prior to any search of the property.
That it was prior to you digging into the bag.
Prior to me entering the property or digging into the clandestine grave, it had already been signed.
Who was the affiant on that search warrant? Where did you get the probable cause facts for the affidavit search warrant?
So I obtained the probable cause for the search warrant reviewing on the camera footage from Deputy Rob, to a welfare check, the 1315, believes that it was water, as well as from a phone conversation I overheard by Detective Morrison, who was on speakerphone with Sergeant Hogan.
Okay. And so those were the only sources of information for your affidavit?
The specific affidavit. I believe that's likely.
Thank you. No further questions, y'all.
Reader.
No, Your Honor, may this witness be excused?
Yes, you may step down. Thank you, sir.
Defendant Morrison.
All right. Please come forward and be sworn.
Right. You solemnly swear to affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Have a seat. State is spell your first and last name for the record.
Detective Heather Morrison, PHR.
You may inquire.
Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you employed? I'm a detective of the Washington County Sheriff's Office. How long have you been employed as a detective? Since 2020. Do you have prior law enforcement experience before you were a detective? Yeah, I was with the county, I've been with Washington County since 2006, so 19 years.
Were you working on May the 17th, 2024? How did you become involved with an investigation into the homicide of Theodore Fleming?
Man, so they believe that a great and everything they're doing already.
And did you respond to the scene or do something else?
Initially spoke with MSP, let them know, that's when we got the information from Detective Soyring. We FaceTime. Well, first we reviewed the detective Rob's body camera, got the information, got the search warrant signed. Then we found that the defendant was coming back to station one to be interviewed. So we had MSP en route, got the body discovered by Detective Soyring, and then I interviewed the suspect.
Where was the defendant interviewed?
In interview room number 3 at the sheriff's office here.
Are you able to identify the person that you interviewed on May the 17th, 2024? You see him in this courtroom? Can you tell me where he's sitting and what he's wearing?
People green jumpsuit on and
Your Honor, may this record reflect the witness identify the defendant?
So reflect without objection.
Was the defendant read his Miranda warnings?
yes,
Did he waive those rights and agree to speak with you and Detective Reisanen? Did he say how long he'd been living with Theodora?
approximately 2 months, about 2 months in time.
2 months this time, you said? How did he describe her physical condition?
He said that his grandmother was frail, that she had rods in her back and neck, and that she had COPD. That she would not be able to make it to the end of the driveway if she had to walk.
When asked about Theodora what did the defendant say at first?
That he didn't know.
Did he say when the last time he saw her was?
He said that he believed it was Tuesday morning.
Was the defendant questioned about any digging or other activity that had happened in the backyard?
He was.
And how many people did the defendant say had dug in that backyard?
He said the only people that had access to the backyard today were, to his knowledge, himself and maybe Theodore did a little bit.
Had anyone else been in the backyard digging to the defendant's knowledge?
Yes.
Was the defendant ever confronted with information about what had been found by law enforcement in the backyard garden / flower bed area? How was that done?
The material that had been exposed, photographs that we received from the scene.
At first, did he claim any knowledge of what had been found in the garden or flower bed?
No.
What did he say?
So that he didn't know what it was.
Eventually, did you discuss what was found in the flower bed? You and Detective Reisanen with him?
Yes. He found, Theodore.
What did he say after that happened?
That he knew what happened, but he was afraid that we wouldn't believe what he had to say.
Did he ever tell you how Theodore had gotten into the flower bed?
Yes.
What did he say?
So that he picked her up and that he drugged her out there after he had killed her.
Did he describe killing her?
Yes.
What did he say about that?
He said that on Tuesday morning, his grandmother had come downstairs. I guess I should back up and say that earlier, Monday, they had gotten into a little bit of an argument about what happened at the vet. She also had been
talking to him about getting a job or going back to school. This made him feel like his grandmother didn't love him anymore. He had felt that way for a while.
You said the vet. Let's stop there for a second and back. You said something about Monday at the vet. What happened Monday? What did the defendant say happened Monday at the vet?
Monday at the vet, he said that Peter got upset with him because he was laughing. The dog was, this big dog, he's uncontrollable.
And they had gone to the vet with the dog?
Yeah.
What happened while they were at the vet?
So, the defendant had a hold, Humphrey, who's the dog, had a hold Humphrey, and because he wasn't sedated properly. And so Peter got upset, and Ronald ended up storming out by leaving Peter there.
What did he say happened later on Monday?
They had a conversation about, him getting a job and going back to school.
And anything else that happened that said between the two of them? What about Tuesday? Anything that he said happened between the two of them on Tuesday?
Tuesday, Peter came downstairs, asked him about getting a job or, going back to school again. He said that Peter had, a knife in her hand. And that he came out of his bedroom, she was standing in the threshold to the door. Kind of just with her hands, the way that he did it in the interview was just kind of like her hands on her hips, as a grandmother would.
You just made a motion with your arms that I want to describe and make sure is accurate. You've sort of closed your hands and placed the tops of your hands on your hips with your elbows out at an angle. Is that correct? Does that describe the way that he said Theodore was holding her arms?
That's how he displayed it in the interview.
Very good. What did he say happened after that?
He said that he came out and that they continued their, quote unquote.
What happened next?
He says that Peter lunged at him. He grabbed her, spun her around, disarmed her.
When you say disarmed her, what do you mean?
So he did a reenactment with Detective Bryson, and he said that he knocked the knife out of her hand.
What did he say he did after he knocked the knife out of her hand?
He put her in what I would call a very naked choke. So he demonstrated putting his arm around Peter's neck. And that she was able to escape from that. And she turned towards him and tried to claw at his face. So he grabbed Peter around the throat, one with his hands, and strangled her until he got her neck.
Did you ask him if he had been hurt during this at all?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said that he had some scratches on his left arm. He also gave alternative explanation for it, that either being the dog had scratched him on Monday. He at one point said maybe the knife, that he recanted that was the knife that the dog or Peter had scratched on their hands.
You described a few moments ago that he had put her in what you called a rear naked chokehold. Could you describe exactly the positioning of their two bodies that he said that they had while he strangled her with his arm?
So a rear naked choke for me would be his arm was below her neck, coming around, cutting off the airway, or the neck. Her back would be against his chest, so she would be facing away from him and he would be directly behind.
What did he say happened after Theodora? Well, he said he strangled her until he felt her neck snap. What happened? What did he say happened after that?
He drove her body to the back of the basement, where there was maybe a storage or wine cellar area, which kind of like a very area with shelves. He laid her against the wall. And then later he put her on top of the quilt in that area. He waited till it got dark, and then he carried her up the stairs. His explanation for that was that she was heavy. He went outside, and in the area where the garden had been previously dug up for some hostas. other plants. He just left her laying there on the ground and then dug the hole so that it was big enough for he could fit in and then.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? I'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah.
How long you been a detective? So you've been trained on taking statements from suspects in custody? One of those things you've been trained on is when a suspect's in custody, before they can be interrogated, they must give a waiver of their Miranda rights. And that waiver, you've been trained, has to be voluntary.
Yeah.
And the individual has to understand the rights that they are waiving.
Yes.
Is your testimony before this court today that when you saw Mr. Fleming Jr., the defendant, were you able to observe him?
Yeah.
You were able to observe his mannerisms?
Yeah.
You were able to observe his speech? And you believe that he was of competent mind to waive his Miranda warnings?
I'm objecting to that.
Sustained. Sustained. As to the phrasing of the question. Go ahead.
Did you believe that he understood his Miranda warnings? You didn't see anything to alert you that he may have some sort of a mental illness or mental situation prohibiting him understanding those Miranda warnings?
Fleming stated that he had some college education, that he had not been drinking, and that he had stopped smoking marijuana so that he could gain employment.
And at this time, I'd ask the court to take judicial notice that Mr. Fleming Jr. has been found incompetent. It was at the forensic center, I believe, according to the court file, for close to a year.
Your Honor, the sentence
that-
restored to competency.
That he's since been restored.
Since been restored, absolutely.
But you're asking me to take judicial notice of the competency timeframe?
Yes, Your Honor. One of the things,
But you're not asking me, because I couldn't, to make a finding regardless of that as to his competency on the date and time that he's questioned.
no, but you couldn't do that, but we'll be asking you to take that into consideration in evaluating the statement. The court can, when evaluating the statement of defendant, consider circumstances surrounding this. One of those circumstances would be his mental state.
Yes, but you're asking me to, I think, take his competency as a way of indicating that I would be basically adjudicating his competency on the date and time that he's questioned, based upon what was a finding that happened later.
Yes, Your
I
Honor.
don't think I could do that.
If that's court's ruling, Your Honor, we accept that.
Okay.
Yep. No further questions, John.
Any redirect?
I have a redirect, Your Honor.
You may step down. Thank you. Additional witnesses.
No additional witnesses, Your Honor, request.
No witnesses, John.
All right.
Your Honor, people do request the court bind over the defendant on the sole count of open murder for the death of Theodore Fleming. I do believe that we have established by a probable cause standard that the defendant did cause her death. And I ask the court bind this matter over for further proceedings. I'll reserve any further argument for rebuttal.
Right. Yeah, we'd ask the court to not bind over again. We rely on two reasons. We believe here the warrantless entry into the home of Mr. Fleming Jr. can only be justified under the emergency aid exception. Now, the emergency aid exception allows police to make a warrantless entry into a dwelling in which they reasonably believe, based on specific articulable facts, that some person within that dwelling is in the immediate need of aid. They are not allowed to do anything more than that is necessary to render aid to a person who may need aid. Here, the responding officer, based on the testimony here, we would concede that the initial entry into the home was under an emergency aid exception. He received information from family members saying that they hadn't heard from a family member for quite some time, that was unusual for that family member, which is important. The court has to determine whether or not it was unusual for this family member to not be in contact with other family members for days in order for the court to render this emergency aid exception valid. And then the officer goes in and does a check to see if there's anybody in the home that needs aid. There is not. At that point, the officer has done everything that is necessary to determine if there's somebody in that home that needs emergency aid. Now this is a criminal investigation. He is suspicious about the whereabouts of the individual who's missing, Thedra, and he is investigating that. As part of that investigation, he goes to a backyard. He starts digging. He does not have consent of anybody that has standing or authority to grant consent to dig in that backyard. He digs in that backyard without a warrant. He makes a discovery of the body. That information is passed along to a detective who ultimately gets a warrant, but based on the questioning of that deputy, the substantial majority of the information that came from or that went into the affidavit came from the people who were at the scene and would have come from the unlawful digging and warrantless digging into the backyard. So any argument that inevitable discovery would apply to the discovery of the body, I don't think can stand. Your Honor, we'd ask the court to suppress the discovery of the body in this case because the officer clearly acted outside the exigent circumstances exception when he started digging in the backyard. There is no reasonable argument anybody can make that the officer thought that somebody needed emergency assistance when he started digging into that backyard. And the courts have been clear there is no homicide exception that applies to the exigent circumstances or warrantless search exception. Secondly, Your Honor, we'd ask the court to not give any credibility to the statement given by Mr. Fleming Jr. To the detective. I think the court can looking at the circumstances surrounding the giving of that statement, that my client was not in a position in which to credibly make a decision to speak to police and waive his Miranda rights, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will start by acknowledging that I think defense counsel has asked for suppression
Of evidence based on the lack of a warrant for the initial discovery of Theodra's body. The question before the court, I know the court knows, is of course bind over on the homicide. So I don't know that I understand defense counsel's request and his argument, but I do believe that the suppression issue will be fully litigated in circuit court.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the defense can't raise it at some
100%.
point, because if I were to agree with the defendant, then there may not be probable cause to find the defendant. Oh,
Yes, Your Honor.
yes, sir.
And we appreciate it coming up, and I anticipated this issue coming up at this level as well as when we get into circuit court. I will say that there is more than one exception that applies and that people would allege apply. First of all, consent. The first initial search of the home when we talk about our consent exception is done with somebody that appears to have authority. Your sister has a key to your house and she hasn't heard from you. She can give consent to a police officer to go in as a community caretaker, as agent of yourself, to look for this person. So I do believe that the search with the initial house would be fine for consent, as well as the secondary search. When the defendant, Ms. Toni Curry and Mr. Ronald Sr. are all asked if he can look again, and the defendant, in fact, locks the dog up in the run and goes ahead and looks. Also, Your Honor, I think that it is important to consider the exigency of the situation. This is an elderly woman. No one's heard from her in days. Her phone is full of missed calls, full of unanswered text messages, emails, all these sorts of things that the detective Rob did indicate to the court. So I think it's important for the court to consider that there is an exigency element here. We don't know where Theodra is. We're looking for Theodra. At the time that he's speaking with Detective Rob, at that time, the defendant is the only person in the home. He hasn't seen Theodra. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know where she is. He hasn't heard from her. And it's concerning. We are not sure where Theodra is. I do believe that we have sustained our burden. I think that we do have at least more than one exception to the warrant requirement that would apply here. And inevitable discovery is one of them. Theodra would have continued to be missing. There would have continued likely to be more investigation, more police contact, more police involvement in this case. So I do ask that the court bind this case over and allow us to proceed to trial in the circuit court.
Yes, sir. If the prosecution wants to argue community caretaking actually has a higher burden than exigent circumstance. Exigent circumstance is reasonable belief. Community caretaking is probable cause. And for community caretaking, they have to show that these officers believe that there was an ongoing emergency and a danger to the public. There is clearly no testimony that they believe to that. And the deputy testified he did not ask for consent before he started digging. So there could be no consent to that portion. We conceded in our.
Would consent to access to the premises have to be to every act?
Yes, the officer has to operate.
What I'm asking is, if you give me consent to go into the house, I don't have to get separate consent to enter the kitchen as opposed to entering the bedroom. Right.
That is correct, Your Honor. And now consent, now he's now dead, not on the court anymore. Now, I didn't agree with a lot that Justice Andrew Scalia said, but he was not a fan of consent.
Yeah.
I actually am.
That Mr. Johnson is going to quote Scalia. Go ahead, sir.
And the aspect that he was not a fan of consent because he didn't really believe that suspects could ever really consent to armed police officers. But he and the courts have always kept consent and made it very narrow and tight, that an officer has to have consent for the specific actions that they are engaging in. I agree with you. If an officer asks me to search my home, that includes the bedroom and the kitchen, because I can revoke the consent at any time. But if an officer asks me to search my home, and then the officer then goes into the backyard and starts digging up, engaging in action that he has not asked for permission to do, then that would be outside the scope of consent.
Yeah, but hold on. That's not what happened here, though, because the officer never leaves. The officer it's not as though the officer was in the house, got consent to do something in the house, then walked outside and just went to the backyard. They had already been through the backyard, had gone through. So this was, where are you saying, if this court believes that there was consent not only to search the house, but also to search the premises, where are you saying that consent ended?
It is
where they needed additional.
Yes. I concede there was consent to search the house. There was never any testimony of consent to search the yard or the structure that was in the yard. It is our position that the deputy needed additional consent.
Why would he have needed additional consent? Because when they're in the home, they all leave the premises and start walking around the outside of the premises into the yard. Right? So you're saying that once he's in, then they come out, that he has to have some separate consent?
To dig in the backyard?
Well, no. Because once he's there, the digging would be like searching the house and moving a board, and all of a sudden you see something. The issue of consent, I'm trying to figure out where you're saying he needed additional consent.
He needed additional consent to search the yard. He had permission to search the home. He did not have permission to search the yard. And it's our position that the deputy knew it. That's why he didn't ask. He just went back there and started digging. He didn't even ask for permission to search the yard. And we believe.
But if the deputy believed he already had consent, of course, he wouldn't ask again necessarily, right?
Well, he didn't testify that he believed that he already had consent. So, I mean, that I guess that's something the court will have.
Well, the actions of what happening are a continuation. If one believes that consent was originally given, that he's walking around with the individuals that are giving him that consent. I mean, he's given a key, go into the premises. The three of them are there. The three other individuals
are in the house, yes.
In the house, but ultimately they're all outside, right? And then there is this searching around the premise.
Right, they're not all outside at the time of digging. They're, based on the testimony, and it is our position, the only person that had authority to grant consent was Mr. Fleming Jr. we do not believe that there's facts in the record that would establish by probable cause that this officer could have believed that anybody else had the apparent authority to grant him consent after the moment he discovered that Mr. Fleming.
Wouldn't I believe that a person who hands me the key to the premises has the apparent authority to give me consent to search? Why wouldn't I believe that? Why wouldn't that be a reasonable belief?
Your Honor, people give keys to neighbors or family members for, all kind of emergency reasons. That doesn't mean that they
Yeah,
can.
but that, as to whether or not that person, there's a difference between whether or not that person exceeded their authority and whether or not the person who is sort of believes they have consent reasonably believes under the circumstances that this person can grant consent for me to search.
And Your Honor, I think we are, we getting off. We're in separate lanes. We've conceded.
Oh, no, I know we're in separate lanes.
We've conceded the initial entry into the house was based upon the apparent authority of a woman that was there. Okay. Once the deputy discovered that the only person that lived there was Ronald Fleming, then the apparent authority of anybody else there has now been dissipated. There's only one person who would have standing to grant a search under those circumstances. Now, we can get into
I'd like
Olson
case law on that because I don't think that's true.
Minnesota v. Olson
the deputy comes into the home. He's searching. I find somebody there. Somebody says they live there. You're saying at that point, the consent terminates?
Yeah, what I'm saying is the apparent authority terminates. Remember the testimony. The officer didn't ask these individuals any questions to ascertain whether or not they had any legal standing in that location. The only person, based on the testimony, that had legal standing in that location was Ronald Fleming Jr. I'm surely under Minnesota v. Olson, I don't think there's any argument the government could make and that the court could accept that Ronald Fleming Sr. or this other woman had standing at that location. So now we're looking at who had the apparent authority to grant the second consent search.
But why was the second one needed?
Because the search had terminated, the first search had terminated. Yes.
They hadn't left the premise. I mean, where are you saying it terminated?
When the deputy does not find Deidre, comes back out with Mr. Fleming Jr., and he's given that testimony about him being outside for some period of time, talking with the family, before he asks again if he can go search. It is our position that that second entry was not an exigent circumstances search. It wasn't even a community caretaking search. It was simply a consent search. She was not there. There was no reason for him to believe that she was inside that home and needed aid. But he had consent to search the home, which at that point was given. We are not contesting that. The issue here is the scope of that search. The scope of that search did not exceed to the backyard.
But the problem is that problem with that analysis is the individuals, it's the officers acting, the individuals who have granted him the consent as they're going around are the same individuals that are going around the backyard with him. That's the problem or the trouble I guess I'm having with your argument. It's not as though he had never gone into the backyard prior to that. That's not what happened here. That initial search, you'd have to show me something that initial search, that consent that the officer was acting under only included the physical structure of the house and didn't include the outside, because the factual circumstance of this clearly in my mind indicate there was also this consent to search the entirety of that premise.
Now, with that concept, it is our position that the courts of higher jurisdiction have taken a separate position that the court has taken. It is the position of the government to show that the consent was valid, what the scope of the consent was, and that the officers acted within that scope. It is not my burden to establish in a warrantless search that the government acted outside the scope.
No, but I understand that part of the argument, but you're saying that at some point it ended or didn't include the outside of the premises.
Exactly.
And I'm asking you, when did that happen? I'm stating what the facts are as I see them, and that is that there was the inside, there's the outside, they're all going around the premises. At no point did that search stop.
Well, I guess that makes it easier for me. So under the case law, the court has to ask itself 3 questions. Did the officer ask anybody with standing to grant permission to search that backyard? The answer to that question is no. Did the officer have a search warrant to search that backyard? The answer to that question is no. And so now is that the consent is ambiguous, or there's an ambiguity in the consent of who has the burden of showing that the officer's actions were within the scope of that consent, and that is the government. And here,
you're saying that when they first come to the house, someone hands him a key, the officer goes in, that even apparent authority to the apparent authority that person exhibits granting consent at some point just disappears?
absolutely. My sister has a key to my house. She hasn't heard from me or my.
Both can be true, Mr. Johnson. One can have apparent authority grant that consent, but also there be another person that can grant consent. It doesn't make the other, it doesn't negate the other. Both can be true at the same time. Can't they?
I don't think so, Your Honor. My sister has a key to my house. She calls the police and says, I haven't heard from whomever that lives at this residence. I'm giving you permission to enter. The police enter the location. They see me there. I live there. At this point, no reasonable officer could think that my sister, who doesn't live there, has the apparent authority to continue to grant searches at that location when an individual who lives at that location is actually present.
But okay, but isn't it dependent upon what one's searching for?
No, Your Honor, the emergency aid exceptions made that clear. The heightened or crime that is suspected or the type of emergency that is suspected has no bearing, because the courts of higher jurisdiction have always been clear. Go get a search warrant. There is no reason why this officer could not have radioed in and said, hey, been called out here for a welfare check, not find anybody. These are my levels of suspicion. I need a search warrant to search the entire premises.
Okay.
Thank you.
2 final things, if I may, Your Honor. The
Yes.
court has received the post-mortem examination report. It does indicate that the cause of death was strangulation, the manner of death was homicide for Miss Deidre Fleming. And the last I'll say is that defense counsel's example about giving his sister a key, his sister calling in a welfare check, and then the police arriving at his home and seeing him is very different than what happened here. Because the subject of the welfare check was Deidre, not the defendant. Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, Chris, gonna take a brief recess and I'll come back to you. You got all set over.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Thank you.
Not a problem. They didn't want you to be. I was looking out for you. Need you to know that. Court does recall the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Ronald Fleming.
Ashley Lonnie Feltus for the people.
Good afternoon, may it please Court, Kareem Johnson on behalf of Mr. Fleming.
The court has heard the testimony and argument of counsel regarding the preliminary examination in this case. The issue, and it have to be dealt with, certainly upset the court for the the purposes of the search. However, court in looking at case law and also just the factual circumstances, they're a little bit different than anything the court was able to find. But what is very clear is that when the first deputy arrived, that there was given to that deputy consent to search the premises. There's not a doubt in this court's mind that there was. And that whether or not that person granting that consent, either one of the two that originally are, I think it was reasonable that the officer were to believe that they had apparent authority to grant permission for the search of the premises. The question then becomes, and I think it's also important, and Mr. Johnson has brought up on behalf of the defendant, the issue of standing to challenge the search. And then their standing is different from that apparent authority or grant of consent. Standing would come into play if there were a challenge to the search. And does somebody have standing to raise that challenge? That really is the customary way that that would work. And I don't think that this really would involve an issue of standing, but certainly as to whether or not there was proper consent and whether or not the officer acted certainly in good faith in terms of that consent. I think it's also important to point out, as the court has, that that consent, at no point do I see that the officers acted beyond the scope of the consent that was granted. Just on the face of it, they went into the house, but then came out of the house and at some point re-entered the house, but they were searching the house and the adjoining area. There was a walk around in terms of the backyard because the freshly dug portion of the garden area where the decedent was found was indeed noticed by the officer at a certain point. He doesn't do anything with that at that point, but is still going around. And if the court, in terms of the court's notes, it is correct, there's other information being given to the officers that are there. For example, that we can't find a decedent. We've done all the calling around to hospitals, ambulance, seeing if there are calls for service. There aren't any. But then at some point, they're given her house keys, car keys. Her phone is obviously there. There are, her vehicle is there, and she's not anywhere that they can see. And certainly at that point, one can look at it in a lot of ways. Either I think under a certain theory, they're operating on that consent, but I think also those items are creating certain extended circumstances for these officers to continue doing what they're doing because we cannot locate this individual. But what appear to be all of their personal effects are there. They're at the house. So something certainly is amiss, and it involves an elderly human being, and they go through that process. So from this court's perspective, I don't think there's an issue, certainly regarding the consent to search and the initial search that was done. Had Detective Rob or Deputy Rob at that point, upon discovering what he discovered, continued doing something, then maybe we get into another issue of whether or not there should have been a warrant for him to continue on. But I don't think his intrusion and the, say, minor digging, but is looking to uncover what this was in front of him in search for this individual that they can't find is beyond what would have been the consent that was granted. Would also know the three people there, those that court believes certainly had apparent authority to grant, from the officer's perspective, to grant consent, as well as the person that defendant claims had the actual ability, then, which I don't entirely agree with, but I understand the point. While those deputies doing all of this, no one is objecting at all, which I think is further indicia of the consent that was granted to the officer to act. And so for those reasons, I don't find that the issue of the consent, it was followed up with the warrant with reference to the charges of the open murder outside of the confession of the defendant as to what they did and how they killed the decedent in this case. There is also ample evidence where he's in this sort of curtained out dark house in the basement where the owner of that premises hasn't been seen for 3 or 4 days. He does nothing, does not act, does, at least apparently based upon this record, does nothing. To this court indicates not only that he intended to kill the defendant or kill the decedent and did so, but also intended in some way, based upon his actions of taking the body, burying it. In doing that, he was covering up his criminal activity. So taking all of that to account, and just one other thing, I do not find that there's anything defective in the Miranda warnings given, and who it was, the Detective Morrison testified that she believed that upon giving of those warnings, that the defendant understood those warnings, and that the assessment that she made is that he voluntarily waived those rights, and that he did answer. So taking all of that into consideration, taking all of the evidence, including People's Exhibit 1, into evidence, the court does believe that the people have indeed sustained their burden in this case, and would find the defendant over on the charge of open murder. Johnson, you acknowledge receipt of the information waiver training.
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
Your client is standing mute to the charges.
Yes, sir.
Defendant, every way, form, or reading, standing mute. Court will enter a not guilty plea. Pre-trial in this matter will be set
May 26th at 1:30 with Judge Conkey.
May 26, 2026, 1:30 before Judge Conkey.
Thank you. May I approve consent
Thank you.
individually?
Yes, bond, denial of bond will continue.
Hey, thanks for watching. Please do let us know in the comments what you thought of this video. If you'd like to support what we do here, the best way to do it is to pick up some of our merch. You can find it at courtroomfiles.com.